Metal Up World, this is CJ with CJOrtiz.com and MetzelMotivation.com. This is the first of a new 5-message series I'm doing on my personal journey into positive thinking. Now, this is all shown in my Life Domination online coaching program, which you can learn more about if you visit the link below. But all this week, my personal journey into positive thinking. Now, I've done about 700 plus videos in this Life Domination coaching group, and this is the first time I'm going to talk specifically about myself. However, it's not all about me. I hope you understand that. It's about gleaning the principles from an individual's personal journey. I feel like there needs to be more anecdotal examples. I feel like there needs to be more stories in some of what I talk about. It can't all be just the teaching of principles. I think we need to glean some things by some of the challenges that we all face. Now, obviously, this is a one-way. This is a monologue. When we do the Facebook Live videos, we can talk back and forth, but in this case, it's a monologue. But people do ask me, though. They ask me all the time, what inspired me or what motivates me or how did I get into this? How did I get into this motivational thing? What's my background? Do I believe in God? What's my favorite book? What would I recommend that they read as far as motivation goes? So people are interested in the person that's communicating, the messenger, as much as they are interested in the message oftentimes. So I didn't feel any qualms about sharing with you guys a little bit about my personal background. And for me, and I just actually sent out an email to my email list about this, which is something else that you can join. But I sent an email out talking about my shift from positive thinking into possibility thinking. And I made reference to my background when I grew up. And that's really where the whole journey into positive thinking begins. It begins with origins, man. It begins with where I started out. Now, I'm the child of an immigrant. My father was an immigrant from Ecuador in the 1950s, did not speak English, and came up here, which must have been a tremendous challenge for someone of his age and where he was from to come to America in the 1950s. But he believed in himself. He had tremendous self-confidence. And I always saw that in him throughout my years growing up. I always saw the way that he was. I could honestly say that my dad whistled while he worked because I always heard him whistling. He could whistle very good, but he was always whistling. I never saw him down. I'd see him mad, but I never saw him down. I never saw him depressed. I never saw him or heard him say anything negative. If anything was suggested, he always believed it could be done. He always would say absolutely and get right on it. In fact, he was the biggest source of an example that I saw as motivational. But he was a bit heavy-handed in the way that he did it. Okay, so when my brothers and I, because my parents were divorced when I was young, when we would go up to visit him at his house in New York, and we would be off for school for the summer, man. Of course, he's still working down in New York City. He would call us and wake us up at 7 o'clock in the morning and tell us to get our asses out of bed, and we had to go outside and start digging ditches and removing rocks and on our summer vacation. Of course, we never liked that as kids. You see the value of it when you get older, but we didn't dig that as kids. And so my dad was very heavy-handed in the way that he tried to inspire and instill him. And he always talking about what we should do with our lives, what careers we should get into. And he was very limited. He just saw things as you could be an engineer, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer. That was pretty much the only options that you had. But he was heavy-handed in the way that he did it, but years removed as an adult, he's passed away now. I would love to sit down and talk to him and find out, where did this attitude come from? Where did your mindset come from, Dad? Where did you learn to think and be so confident in yourself? But what a challenge for him to, again, come into a brand new land from a foreign country as an immigrant, and he rose up the ranks, man, to be a head foreman of one of the larger contracting corporations in New York City, the people who pave Park Avenue and all that kind of stuff. So he did very well for an immigrant. He was brilliant too, man. He had all kinds of inventions and things that he did and always working and all that sort of stuff. And so he was a much greater inspiration now than I appreciated when I was young. But I got a part of that DNA in me. I got a part of that gene pool in me. So I was sort of wired to be positive, although when I'm a kid, man, I'm not really like that. I was just more optimistic, but I would still do what all kids do, rebel, be lazy, put off work and all that kind of stuff. It really really kicked in much later in life, but the basic wiring was there. Now, when I was about 12 or 13 years old, my mom had been remarried. We were living in New York, and they said that my new stepdad was changing jobs, and he was going to work from IBM to Texas Instruments, and that took me to Dallas, Texas in like 1978, 79. That, my friend, was a culture shock. It was a culture shock for me to go across the country. Of course, I'd heard of Texas before. I was a Dallas Cowboys football fan when I was a kid, but I never imagined living there, and that was so far off the map for me. I thought, man, is it going to be just cowboy boots and cowboy hats and cactus? Is that all it's going to be? I had no concept, no clue at the age of 12 or 13 years old what Texas would be like. But, I moved down there and I moved into the suburbs because I was living in old school New York. So these were old neighborhoods that had been around since, the early 20th century. So it wasn't like the newly built suburbs of Dallas, Texas. And that's a whole nother world, man. All I know is everybody down there is a giant. Everybody was so much bigger than me, even though, I'm not a tall guy. So I guess anybody is going to be taller than me. It just seemed like everybody was so big down in Texas. It was intimidating. And I'm down there with this New York accent. So I was an easy target, this little guy. And I went into junior high, and my younger brother moved down there with me. My older brother was in high school, so he wasn't with me the first day of junior high. My younger brother was in elementary school, so he wasn't with me. So I was all by myself in what I deemed to be a foreign land. And I realized later, just like my father, I just felt like I was in a foreign land, not to the degree that he did, but man, it felt like that because those Texans did not give a damn about a Yankee. They didn't care. The Civil War was still going on south of the Mason-Dixon. So, it was a struggle. And so when you're this tiny thing and, I had the New York accent that they made fun of, I was just this target for teasing. Man, I had to rely upon something because I didn't have anything else to lean on. I couldn't lean on my size or stature. I couldn't be threatening to anybody. I couldn't hide that New York accent. There was nothing that I could do. So I had, again, that basic wiring. And so I learned to lean on that. I leaned on my wit. I leaned on my creativity. In fact, I did so well that within 2 years, I won a talent contest at the junior high and got voted in because of popularity, vice president of the student council. Now, I had no business being vice president of the student council, I can be honest with you. But I believed, you know what I mean? I believed and I made it happen. Now, when I came to Texas on that first day of school, I was Chris Ortiz. But in the very first class that I went into, my teacher was reading off the roll call. And she said that when I call off your name, say present and tell me if there's anything else you want to be called. In other words, if you have a nickname or some other name that you use. And so by the time she got to the O's, there was already 3 or 4 Chris's in the class. And so I sat there and thought, and within a moment, when she asked me and I said present, she said, is there anything else you'd like to be called? I just looked up at her and said, yeah, call me CJ. And that was the start right there. That was the start of the change of my identity. When I had to begin the process of making my place in that foreign world, I changed my name. I said, I'm no longer Chris, call me CJ. And so from then on, I became CJ. And so again, within a couple of years, I won the talent contest, got to know a bunch of people, and became vice president of the student council. Now, you must know, though, I was impeached. I was dismissed from the student council not too long after that because I was caught showing a friend of mine a switchblade out of my backpack, which I had gotten from somebody else. And it was not a big deal. One of the coaches turned me in, so it kind of sucked. But I did make it to vice president of the student council. But I continued to meet people and all that sort of thing, and I made up for the fact that I wasn't 6'7", like everybody else seemed to be. But it was that basic belief, that basic confidence that I had gotten from my dad. And so it would, as time would go on, man, this was going to begin to grow exponentially. So I hadn't really registered yet. I wasn't resourcing. I wasn't reading books or anything like that on inspiration or motivation. I was just put in a position where I was forced to stand up for myself, where I was forced to make a name for myself, where I was forced to do something to make a life. I had left everything that I knew, family, everything, friends, everybody that I knew in New York, where I'd grown up, where I was perfectly happy to stay. I left all of it and went to Texas. And so as I go on in some of this journey, I'm going to break down some of the principles here, but I want to explore, you know what I mean, what it takes, because no matter what, whether it's me way back when or my dad when he immigrated in the 1950s, we all have those points of entry. We all have those moments where the environment changes, the circumstances change, you know what I mean? Kids move out of the house, you get a divorce, you wake up to health challenges, something. There's always these points of entry and these moments in our personal history where we've got to reshape, we've got to rethink, we've got to adapt to the environment, adapt and overcome. So that's what I'm going to be talking about all this week in the Life Domination online coaching program. Like I said, if you want to learn more about it, you can see the rest of these videos as well as have access to the 700 plus videos in the archives. It's real cheap, real easy to do. Visit the link below, metalmotivation.com/life domination coaching to learn more about it. This is CJ, the Metal Motivator. And remember, in whatever you do, don't suck. Metal up.